All right, guys, well, let's get this show on the road. Obviously, this is the continuation in a webinar series that we started back in October of 2012 here at Maximum Acceleration. For those of you who just signed in, my name is Erik Janeczko. I'm the head coach and CEO here at Maximum Acceleration. And we launched this program originally to bring together a community of learning for the mortgage and real estate industry. People who are dedicated and want to grow their skill and ability to be able to make a bigger difference in the community, who want to engage and invest energy and time in refining and perfecting their skill and ability at how they conduct their daily business so that they can produce a better result. And that's the whole focus of why we developed this Maximum Performance webinar series. To that end, that's why we also encourage you to participate using telephone mic instead of computer mic and speakers, because you get better overall quality out of that. The other thing that we are going to be doing in today's program is I really want to see feedback and comments from you guys as we're going through the program. This particular program, the session that I'm taking you through today, is designed by purpose to be very interactive. So there's a couple of things that we've done a little bit differently today. One is you'll notice that in the chat box, there is a link to a folder where you can download a copy of an action guide that we're going to be using throughout today's session, as well as some other audio resources, or Excel spreadsheet resources. There's also a handouts button in the control panel that we're going to be using. Also, I want to hear from you. As I get to certain sections in the program today, I'm going to be asking for interactive response, and the best way to do that is using the questions box in the control panel. By the way, if you want to even go ahead and undock it from the control panel, use that little arrow out of the corner button, and that will open it up and pull it up to where you can enlarge it to where you can see more of the conversation going on with the audience as we're going through today's program. Because today's program is really about you. It's about ideas and how to take your best ideas and make certain that they get implemented. So in today's program, we're going to be walking you through a step-by-step process that we've developed over the last 12 years, designed specifically to help you take advantage of and create a drill-down execution or strategic growth plan for your business for the next 12 months and what you want to accomplish over the next 12 months from this resource. So whether you've just come back from a recent conference or whether you are thinking about and exploring ideas of how you could change your business for the coming year, this process that we're going to walk you through today is designed to help you create maximum momentum as you think about how to perfect and refine and grow your business to higher levels of volume and growth. In doing that, I want to make sure you have the action guide downloaded. By the way, guys, let me know if you can through the Q&A, whether I'm coming through loud and clear or not. Please just go ahead and chime in if you would, and let me know you can hear me, guys. Okay. Go ahead and pop those comments into the Q&A. There are going to be times throughout today's program where I'm going to be asking for response from you guys, and it would really help me out if you guys could go ahead and hop on and type in some comments in that questions box for me. So yeah, there you go, guys. All right. Looks like we've got some friendly folks and some names I recognize. That's always good to see. Folks who've chimed into our program and become regular participants in our programming. That's good to see. All right, guys, so make sure you've got a copy of the action guide. The chat box is where I just posted the link to where you can download that. You can go in, or if you can grab it out of the handouts box here in the this coaching platform as well. And then we'll be getting right into the meat of today's program here momentarily. Well, guys, what it really comes down to is when it comes to thinking about what do you want to change, grow, or evolve about your business, regardless of whether you work with a coach, whether you work with a business development consultant, or whether you're just trying to do it from more of an introspective purpose, anytime you want to change, grow, or evolve, you're typically going to go through 3 phases: an assessment, a planning, and execution phase, which is not too dissimilar from what most companies or most organizations have used over the years for strategic growth, like strategic planning events often done by corporations over the country. If you've ever been part of a larger corporation, it's likely that you've been involved in some sort of strategic planning project or long-range planning project. The problem with most, and this is something we learned back in 2004 and 2005, when as a company we did our initial research and development work. Our company, Maximum Acceleration, was originally started by loan toolbox as an organization. And Tim Brahim, who was one of the top originators in the country at the time, basically took all of his knowledge and information of everything he had done to build his practice to phenomenal levels of production, 80-plus loans a month in production, and documented all of it, put it into this warehouse of information he called the Loan Toolbox. Well, one of his frustrations in 2003 or 4 was that he had grown it to around 3,000 members, but he was getting very frustrated because he would go out and he would introduce it to people that would sign up. They would log in a time or two, but then they'd disappear, never to be heard from again. So he launched what he called the implementation project. Myself and about 6 other gentlemen, participants, were brought online to be a part of that. What initially was just supposed to be a think tank project blossomed something much larger. Ended up being a little over 1,000 man-hour project. The team of 7 of us basically went through identifying what it really took to bridge the gap between idea and implementation and follow through, so that something could really you take a key concept or idea, like a business development partnership strategy, a way of approaching realtors, for example. Well, you hear something, it sounds good, but if you don't do anything with it, it has no value, right? The other thing that often comes along with it is how many great ideas do you hear at conferences, like maybe the one you just returned from, that stay in the notebook, that gets put on the bookshelf, that never gets looked at, and 6 months later you're blowing the dust off of it, wondering why you didn't implement those ideas. Well, that's what that whole research project was about. That led to the development of the coaching program. That led to the development of the business plan conference series that ran between December of 2005 and 2011, and the creation of the business planning tool, as well as our Power Strategic Growth model. And that's what we're going to introduce you to today, is a tactical, practical way of taking those key ideas and making sure they get implemented. Because there's a fatal flaw. One of the things we learned about that research and development project is that most strategic planning programs start in a weird place or in a reactive place. Like, for example, if you've ever been introduced to the idea of a SWOT analysis. Now, SWOT, S-W-O-T, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths and weaknesses. But if you really think about it, is that a proactive or a reactive process? I mean, we're looking at what are my internal strengths and weaknesses, and what are the external opportunities or threats that exist in the market, in the community around me, or the community that I seek to serve. Well, if you're honest, it's a pretty reactive process, right? What's going on around me, and how do I react to it just briefly to try and create a little bit of growth? And that's why you see companies looking at difficulties and challenges of even moderate double-digit growth. 10, 20% growth year over year becomes an overwhelming challenge because they're looking at it from a reactive standpoint. What it fails to do is to think about, wait a minute, what do we really want this to look like? So one of the key things we realized that was most important is that we need to start with a bigger picture and a clearer vision of what we want to create proactively. Then once we're clear on what we want to create, then we can work backwards to engineer a plan of how to achieve it. So that's why our Power Growth model, with POWER being an acronym, P, purpose, obstacles, W, winning strategies, E, engagement, and refinement, are the steps in the 5-step Power Growth system. Most importantly, we begin with the end in mind. I mean, here's the reality. We've learned over the years that nothing is impossible. It is simply a matter of strategy, resources, and the appropriate application of both. Now, some of you might be thinking I'm completely nuts when I say that. But think about it from this perspective. Let's use an example of Quicken Loans, right? Like them, love them, or hate them, nobody knew who they were 8 years ago. Today, they're one of the biggest mortgage companies in the United States. Obviously, they had massive resources being funded by the Quicken organization. Intuit is the holding company. They had strategy. It's pretty clear to identify what they position themselves as, at least in the marketplace, whether they provide that layer of value or not. And that's for you to judge for yourself. But they've done that effectively. And in that context, they've created massive triple-digit growth year over year the previous 8 years running. So what I want to challenge you to think about for a moment is, even if you get to a point where you begin to think, well, that's just not possible, what would it look like if it was possible? So as we start to look at the phases of the power growth model, phase one is about purpose. What are we really passionate about? What are we really driven by? What motivates us? Why do we do this crazy business? Why have we continued to stay in it year after year? And by the way, feel free to go ahead and post some of your thoughts or ideas. What is the things that drew you to the business to begin with, and what are the things that have kept you in the business throughout the years of your career? Feel free to let me know in the Q&A some of your thoughts in that perspective. Well, the second thing is that passion then drives to purpose. What can we do, and what are the realities of how we could change the dynamic of the value that we provide to the customers we have the privilege and honor of serving, which then leads to the paycheck. And what kind of a lifestyle do we want to design and create for ourselves, recognizing that we are in control? I mean, every one of you on this call most likely are in a partially commissioned, or most of you are in a full commissioned type position, which means at the end of the day, if it is to be, it's up to me. It's my responsibility to get out there and get it done. And if I don't, who do I have to blame? Nobody but myself, right? Well, the next phase is the obstacles, challenges, winning solutions, engagement. And there's a drill down layer to each of these, and those are what the tools are going to walk you through as we go step by step. For example, if you've recently returned from one of the conferences that we've talked about, one of the things we encourage you to do in the action guide, which this is basically the first 15 or so pages in the action guide, or notes pages, which walk you through a process of catching key ideas while you're at the conference. By the way, those of you who download this action guide, you're welcome to use this at any future conference. Part of the reason I give it to you in a PDF form is so that you can reprint it as many times as you want. And I encourage you, the next conference you're going to go attend, there's several coming up in the fall here, I encourage you to use this action as a way of taking great notes. There's some tips and tricks on how to sort and prioritize that information, so you've gotten some key ideas that you want to change or evolve. Or if you're just being introduced to this concept, if it wasn't introduced to you at a conference that we were speaking or presenting at, and you were not given an action guide, step back and look at it from the bigger perspective. What do you really want your business and life to look like? And let's talk about purpose for just a minute. You know, it really comes down to defining what's important to you, and what are the things that motivate you. Like, for example, the importance of helping people acquire the American dream of homeownership. Somebody chimed in through the Q&A. Thanks, Diane, for posting that comment. You know, you see, that kind of is one of the things that was near and dear to my heart as an originator in the late 90s and early 2000s. You know, my story goes a little bit along the lines of, by the way, I wasn't always as cute and as good looking as I am right now, right? Thanks for great marketing, who made the opening shot that you saw on the first slide look a little better. This was my first headshot when I got into business in 1996. Boy, was I really excited when I got that first professional headshot done at Walmart, believe it or not. I was proud of that picture. I was 40 pounds lighter then too, but hey, that's life, right? Well, I'll tell you what, I got into business in 1996. I worked as a junior loan officer for a guy who was very productive, but I was his second junior loan officer. We had a 5-person team total. As a team, we were doing about 40 loans a month, but it was 95% refinance. Well, in early 1997, we hit one of those market jumps. Rates shot up about 1.5 points in less than 2 weeks. We lost 200, 300, 400 basis points in yield spread, and overnight, our pipeline went from about 60 loans to about 10 loans. And myself and another guy were laid off and out on the street looking for a job. So I found a home. I started to originate, and I realized there wasn't really any refinance business to be had. It was purchase-oriented. And after struggling for several months, I finally began to ask the question, well, who are the guys that are doing this at a high level and are succeeding, and how do I get them to teach me what they know? Who are the guys who are teaching them how to be successful? So I invested in my career. I went out and spent a couple $1,000s to go to a training workshop, a full week-long sales training workshop out in Southern California. And I learned a few things, and I brought those ideas back, and I implemented them, and I got some results. And then I went back a second time a year or two later, and then I invested in a personal coach to help guide and help me manage my workflow process and when and how to overcome the unique challenges that I was experiencing. And by the end of the time I left retail production in 2002, in the previous 12 months, I had originated 237 purchase deals. I had a two-person support team dedicated to me as well by that stage of my growth. Now, part of the reason I left retail is because we had to move our family about 200 miles away because of some special needs concerns with my in-laws. But what that taught me was an opportunity. But one of the other reasons that it changed for me is along about 1997, and by the way, the things that drive us and motivate us are usually things that are connected with personal life experiences. You see, in 1997, something pretty interesting happened in my life. December 31st, literally New Year's Eve of 1998, I promptly stepped up, got out of bed first thing in the morning, or tried to get out of bed first thing in the morning, and collapsed to the floor. I couldn't move pretty much anything on the left side of my body, and it was eventually determined that I was being diagnosed with this thing called multiple sclerosis. And later in the afternoon that day, my wife had, of course, dragged me to the hospital. And I remember sitting on the bed of the MRI, all but there to confirm this thing that my doctor thought I already had, because I'd had some preliminary indicator symptoms a couple of years ahead of this. And I remember sitting there thinking that it was kind of a moment of personal reflection. For me, it was a conversation with God about, God, you've kept me alive through 2 major car crashes, a plane wreck, and now this weird MS thing. Okay, I think I'm finally ready to listen. What is it that you would have me do with my life? Well, that launched me down a journey of self-discovery that helped me realize that my true passion was for making a difference in the lives of the people that I had the opportunity to work with. So as an originator, and as my career evolved as an originator, I began to realize that as a mortgage professional, we touch what is the most important financial decision of a family's life in many, many cases. And the reality of it is that we have an opportunity, and in some cases an obligation, to help point out to people what they don't know that could hurt them when they're making such a profound decision. I mean, if you think about it, the mortgage decision for most families, it controls, one, the biggest chunk of their paycheck every month. I mean, we're literally, if we're going to maximum ratios, 33, 36% of their household gross income is being tied up in that mortgage payment, right? It's also what controls, for the most part, what will become a family's biggest asset, which is their real estate. So we have an obligation in some sense. Not only that, but when we do the loan application process, when we're taking a 1003 for a borrower, we see the broadest, widest, most complete picture of what's going on in that family's financial life than pretty much any of the other ancillary service providers around that offer financial services. We see their credit, we see their income, we see their assets, we see their spending habits, we see whether they're growing or shrinking in their consumer debt, whether they're building or saving or identifying assets for the future. And that creates a unique opportunity to have an impact on a family in a way that most have a chance not to. So one of the things I began to realize is that because I had such a strong passion for making a difference in the lives of other people, I realized that well, let me put it this way. You guys have all heard the law of caring, right? People won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Now, some people have criticized me for using something so trite or cliche, but the practical reality is we can't afford to dismiss the things we hear all the time, those cliches, because if you think about it, would it have been repeated often enough to be considered trite if it weren't fundamentally true? Well, over the years, myself and the coaching team here at Maximum Acceleration have realized that there's a second law of caring. We don't know what we don't know until someone cares enough to show us, or we're hungry enough or desperate enough to seek it out for ourselves. So when we know something about an opportunity, for example, that someone around us does not know, when does it shift from a task to an obligation? And the reality of it is, like, for example, if you think about home affordability right now, I mean, as far as how much house for how much monthly payment a family can get right now, we're dealing with some of the highest home affordability that our country has seen in the last 100 years. I mean, you literally have to go back to the late 40s and early 50s to find a situation where you got as much or more house for the monthly payment as you get right now. Unfortunately, there's a whole lot of families out there who are completely oblivious to that home affordability and how powerful that opportunity exists. So at what point do we become truly motivated and passionate about doing everything in our power to spread as broad or as wide or the reach as we possibly can to help those families take advantage of this amazing opportunity? Also realizing that, by the way, the families that are most likely to be able to benefit from it, unfortunately, are probably the families that are least likely to be aware of it. You know, the family that works hard, that pays their bills on time, and they're doing what they feel is the safe thing, continuing to rent. You know, $1,000 a month in rent over 5 years is $60,000. They're literally flushing down a toilet they are never going to own. As a result, what opportunity or what loss of revenue are they missing out on by continuing to follow that rental pattern? You know, some of it becomes, what do you really want to change or evolve in how you look at the relationship you have with your potential customers? One of the things I want you to think about is, are you a vendor or are you an advisor? You know, there's really two basic ways to compete. Think about it from this perspective. Let's say I win the lottery and I decide I want to invest $10,000, right? I've got $10,000. I decide I want to buy some stock. So I can go on E-Trade and I can buy 100 shares of a company currently trading at $100 per share. And I'll pay 10 bucks for that trade. Or I could go to a full-service advisor like a gentleman at Merrill Lynch or a lady at Merrill Lynch, and I can buy that same 100 shares of that same $100 per share company, and I'll spend between $150 to $200 in trade commissions for that exact same transaction. So why on earth would I spend 15 times more for the same system or process, right? Well, what's the advantage? Well, think about it from this perspective. Let's say that the financial advisor, well, I mean, what am I investing in, right? I mean, guys, feel free to post in the Q&A your thoughts on this issue. What it really comes down to is he's got better advice. You know, there's hundreds of companies out there worth $100 a share right now. Which one is the right one for me to buy? I don't know. Unless I have the time and energy and knowledge to be able to investigate it thoroughly, I may have better odds going down to Vegas with that money. I can put it on a roulette table and go red or black, and I got a 50-50 chance of doubling my money. Maybe I got better odds that way. Whereas if I go to the full-service advisor, he's got a full team of financial analysts backing him up, that it's their full-time job to evaluate the financial performance of companies and give me advice on what's a good investment or not. But what if he took it even a step further? What if he looked at it from a longer-term perspective, something way beyond that one transaction, and he gave me advice of saying, look, Eric, let's look at the bigger, broader picture here. You've got some consumer debt. You have limited savings for emergencies. I don't think stock buying right now is the right step for you. I think maybe we should eliminate the $3,000 or $4,000 in consumer credit card debt, eliminating that 20% interest carrying cost, or 1.2% per month that you're spending on just servicing that debt, and then take the additional freed up cash flow and start putting it into a structured savings plan so you have an emergency fund to fall back on. And then when we get that emergency fund to a saturation point, then we can start looking at maybe some more aggressive investing and stock purchasing. So when you guys think about this, when you think about transforming the relationship and what you want to accomplish, what you want to change, grow, or evolve, the first worksheet in the action guide that you want to start using to help you change, grow, or evolve is this. It's on page 16 in your action guide that you downloaded when you logged into today's program. That download on page 16 in the action guide is a worksheet that walks you through really clarifying, sitting back and looking a year from now. What would you really like your business and life to look like? And start with client experience, the nature of your relationships with business development partners, your schedule, in other words, how many hours a week and how many days a week do you work? What do people say about you? What's your vision for what you want your business to look like? What's the goal of what you'd like to create? Now, by the way, you could use this same worksheet to do a longer range plan than just a one-year plan. You could use this for a 3 to 5 year strategic growth plan if you so choose. But let's, if you want, just focus on 1 year for now. So let's fast forward a year from now. We're sitting down a year from now, looking back at what we've accomplished. What does that look like? What is that ultimate vision for you? What are you known as in your community? So take just a couple of seconds and think it through. By the way, feel free to let me know by posting in the Q&A what you'd like to see change, grow, or evolve about your business over the next year. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to continue to fast forward through a number of this information because I want to get to a couple of key points that we're going to drill down on here. But take a moment, and especially if you're watching this on video, pause and jot down your thoughts. If you're watching this live, block out some time later today to actually do this exercise and really take some time to focus on going deep about why. What is the personal benefit to you of making a difference? Like for me, in 99 and 2000, as I was growing and building my practice and as I was doubling year over year, one of the things that really drove me was the fact that I really was seeking to make a bigger difference in my community. And it even got to the point where it got to where it was kind of annoying me that I was seeing customers do silly stuff all the time, like put 20% down on a property to avoid that evil mortgage insurance and completely ignoring tens of thousands of dollars in consumer debt. Or, working so hard to build equity in their property at the expense of saving for their own kids' college or retirement and missing out on years worth of compounding interest growth. So it really became a passion of mine to focus on how to educate consumers on what they ought to consider longer term instead of just looking at that mortgage in that real short-term window or vacuum. So mortgage planning became a concept and ideal to me that became really important. But at the end of the day, we all have families to feed, right? We all have an income that we need to provide to our family, and we have that obligation to ourselves and to our family to drive the kind of lifestyle we want. So there's also some personal goals to that. If you want to get to a point where you've got a level of comfort and you're not worried about whether you're going to make the mortgage payment or not, if a loan closes or not, one of the things that we think about is what is the consistency of consistent volume, right? It's kind of a funnel effect, right? Our marketing campaigns generate a volume of leads. Those leads filter down to a solid piece of interest, and that interest leads to a conversation of whether the borrower is going to do a loan with us or not, which leads to then follow-up and referral opportunities. But how many people do we have to talk to or connect with to generate a consistent closed volume? Well, again, if we use the P or purpose personal goals, a year from now, where do we want to be? Well, there's another tool in the resource folder, and I'll point it out to you just briefly here, guys, that you can utilize. If you go ahead and go back to that resource folder that I posted in the chat and Q&A for you, you'll notice that there are two different things in there. One is the action guide. The other is there's an Excel spreadsheet that is the income and volume goals worksheet. And both of these you can download. If you mouse over, there's a little arrow over on the right-hand side of the screen. It didn't show up on the screenshot for you. But over on the right-hand side, if you mouse over the arrow, it'll pop up a command window and hit the download button. You can store those on your computer. Now, the Excel spreadsheet will do the math for you here, which is why we highly recommend that you go ahead and take the opportunity to download it. But what we're really talking about is creating a consistent volume. So there's really two tabs to that spreadsheet. One is a tab that is labeled monthly minimum. Okay, now that monthly minimum tab is a tab that's designed for you to determine what do you want your annual income to be starting now and going for the next 12 months. Okay, so if you want to make $150,000 as a loan officer over the next 12 months, which averages like $12,000 a month or $15,000 a month or whatever it is, I don't remember exactly, but whatever that is. If you want your gross personal income to be 150,000 a year or 12,000 a month, that's where you'd start. Now you plug in what is your average sales price for your market, what is your comp rate on basis points, and it'll tell you what your average commission is and how many leads you want to generate. Now the most important box on that whole thing is how many leads per week do you need to generate to achieve your goal. Now, thinking about it from that perspective, how many leads per week? By the way, this number in here, capture conversion pull through, basically that is from first contact to closed loan. So there's a couple of cuts that happen along the way. The first fallout will be the people who don't qualify. The second fallout will be the people who, for whatever reason, choose not to move forward alone, or at least not move forward with a loan with you. Whether you lose them to competition or whether you lose them to buyer apathy, that has an impact. Our coaching clients typically experience, even the best of our coaching clients often experience a net pull-through ratio of around 35 to 40%. Now, there are some ways you can improve that percentage. One, by focusing on sourcing from better quality of leads, and two, by working on sales strategy to increase your conversion and capture ratio. But let's set a baseline. Where do you want to be every single month? Because if you know what the activity drive is, how to meet 4 families that you could help improve their housing situation or mortgage situation every single week, or talk to people who could potentially benefit for a week, then you're pretty well guaranteed with the numbers that you're going to net out to what equates to about $12,000 to $15,000 a month, or 4 closed loans in this scenario. Now, the next tab in the spreadsheet is the tab that focuses on your stretch goal. And this is where I want you to challenge yourself to think big. Okay? Set what may feel like, or play with what may feel like, a ridiculously large goal. Okay? Doubling, tripling, quadrupling that base minimum target income over the next 12 months. So a year from now, where would you like to be on a monthly income basis? So if we took that previous example page of 4 leads a month, 4 leads a week would turn into roughly $12,000 a month in income. What if a year from now you wanted to be at $40,000 a month? What would the numbers look like? Right? $40,000 a month would take a closing volume at those kind of comp rates, and again, this is based on a tiered example. Again, you use what works for you, okay? But if your average loan amount is $350,000 and you have a 105 basis point comp rate, that's 11 closed loans a month to make $40,000 in gross commissions, right? Which is only 7 leads a week. It's only 3 more leads a week. Now, here's the really cool thing about this. Now think about, I'm going to say this is the best way to do it, but if I spent a dedicated 1.5 hours to 2 hours a day phone calling, I mean, even if I was cold calling out of the phone book, finding people who had an apartment number next to their address line, and of course scrub it against a do not call list, if I was literally just doing random telemarketing for mortgage prospecting, could I not at least find 7 families that at least had some reasonable interest in buying a home? I mean, would it really take that much more than maybe 1.5 hours to 2 hours to find one? I mean, you're talking 1 good lead if you work 7 days a week. You're talking 1.2 leads a day if you find 1.2 leads if you work 5 days a week. So worst case, my goal is every single day to find 2 families that are reasonably interested in changing or improving their housing situation. Can I do that at least at a minimum? My apologies, guys. I'm fighting a bit of a sinus infection, and unfortunately, I want to blow your eardrums out with coughing as you're listening to the program today. But I'll tell you what, guys, I don't know if that's impossible. Now, it may not be fun. It may not be what excites you. It may not be what energizes you, but it is practical reality that you can determine your own destiny based on the volume of activity. And at the end of the day, you know, how many phone numbers would you actually have to dial to find one or two families who are interested in doing something different with their housing situation? And the practical reality is not that many. I mean, you know, NAR, National Association of Realtors, have been tracking housing statistics and average timeframes of ownerships for decades. And one of the things that over the last, you know, since the late 50s is when they started tracking this data, it's ranged between 5 and 7 years, pretty much the entire history of the example. Now, part of the reason for that is because think about what causes someone to want to move. Well, what causes somebody to want to move is that the housing situation they're in is such a bad fit that it's more painful to stay in that home than it is to move, and that's why people move. That's why we talk about renter to owner opportunities. That's why we talk about family growth, the size of the family. They've simply outgrown the home they're in. We talk about job transitions or relocations, different parts of the area, different parts of the community to reduce commuter time, or relocating to different parts of the country because that's what they have to do for career advancement. Or even on the tail end of the life cycle, you know, they lived in the big 5-bedroom home with 3 stories and a finished basement while they were raising their 3 kids. Now they're, you know, in their 60s and they want to move to more of the baby boomer jet setter lifestyle. They want something that's more luxurious, more built for entertaining, maybe in a maintenance-free, you know, security 24/7 community, so that they can travel more and they don't have to worry about mowing the yard and making it look nice and those kind of things. So maybe they want to right size or lateral improve their living situation more conducive to their lifestyle. See, it's all those housing opportunities that cause people to want to move. And so what that tells me is if 1/5 to 1/7 of the population is likely you know, if people move every 5 to 7 years, that means 1/5 to 1/7 of the population is already thinking about it. So that's 1 or 2 out of 10, 2 to 4 out of 20, you know, 5 to 7 out of 30. Now, the reason I stop at 30 is because there's also a thing called circle of influence. Right? Sociologists have been telling us, study after study, decade after decade, since the late 60s, that the average American knows and is close to around 30 to 35 people that they talk to on a regular basis. It's what we consider our circle of influence. Now, there's an opportunity there to tap into that circle of influence. And there's an opportunity to be able to reach out into that circle of influence for the customers we're already working with. So what if we, instead of thinking about having to organically generate 2 leads a day for ourselves or 7 leads for ourselves per week, what if we could generate or develop over the next 12 months 7 to 10 business development partners? And I say business development partners because I want to shift my thinking from the taking to the giving side of that relationship. What if over the next 12 months you could identify, attract, and secure strong, committed, loyal partnerships with 7 to 10 business partners that you could count on for 1 good, solid lead per week? And encourage them to be thinking proactively about how they could move beyond the transactional hunter-gatherer model of business, of waiting for the next deal to show up and being a lead receiver versus a lead generator, and get them to think about, focus on how proactive activity can lead to where you're no longer a victim of the market. Because, you know, we all have our obstacles and challenges. So what are the difficulties and likely challenges that you're going to experience? Go ahead and post in the Q&A for you, if you would. What are the obstacles or challenges you're likely to experience? Right? What are the issues or difficulties that you're going to have when it comes to approaching business development partners and trying to create value and loyalty and commitment with those business development partners? Go ahead and post in the Q&A for me if you would. What are some of the challenges you've already experienced when it comes to, for example, going after and developing business partnerships with realtors? Feel free to go ahead and post in the Q&A for me, folks, as you're looking at it and thinking about it. All right, there's a good one. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get their attention, right? They won't return your calls. Okay, another one that Joe has posted. Thanks, Joe, for, by the way, chiming in. You posted they already have somebody they're working with that does a good job transactionally. You know, how do you differentiate yourself? Okay, that's another really good one. You know, who do I go after? Okay, that's another great one to post in there. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for chiming in. I really do appreciate your participation in today's program. It makes it a lot easier for me to do my job to see this. Yeah, I mean, here's one of the bigger challenges. I mean, how have realtors, I mean, we've kind of, loan officers over the years have kind of done it to ourselves, right? I mean, the way most loan officers approach realtors over the years has been pretty transactional in nature, right? You know, we promise great service. Oh, we really take care of our customers. We're available. We try and make sure we do it right. We don't tell you the wrong stuff. We want to communicate well with you. We want to make sure that we provide high-class service. Well, here's the problem. If 99 out of 100 loan officers say the same thing, and 98 out of 99 fail to deliver it, because I guarantee you every realtor who's been in the business for 6 months or more has heard at least one loan officer tell them that. Well, does that really differentiate yourself? More importantly, does that raise your credibility with that agent, or does it lower it because you're associating yourself with all the other bozos, crooks, and cheats who've promised and failed before you? Yeah, so how do we change the dynamic of that? What are the solutions to changing the dynamic and not getting caught in that perfect storm of where we're only as good as our last deal, and if anything, God forbid, our fault or not, goes wrong in the course of transaction, we lose all credibility with them because that's all we've promised up front is good service, what everybody else does. Well, one of the things our coaching clients have found is that the first thing you've got to be able to do is go above and beyond. You've got to, just like we were focusing on with the vendor versus the advisor, I mean, when we're up against competing against over 380,000 loan officers and how many dozens of loan officers are in your specific market, right? You know, how many are you competing against? And how do you stand out? How do you differentiate yourself? Well, whatever those obstacles or challenges are, to deal with the truth and reality of them, you've got to identify, based on what you said in the first worksheet about your personal goals, the types of relationships you'd like to have in place, the income volume that you want to achieve, and what has to be put in practice in your business going forward to make that happen, you're going to experience some challenges and difficulties along the way. But it's vitally important that you focus on those challenges and that you work to identify those challenges so that you can deal in truth in the realities of then how to overcome those challenges. Because if we don't think about it, if we're not proactive in communicating why an agent should talk to us or why it's worth their time to consider a potential business partnership with us, we're obviously not going to even get to the first step of a face-to-face appointment. And as a result of that, there's a good probability we miss out on a key opportunity because we can't even break through the firewall of getting that first appointment. So take a moment and jot down what are your biggest challenges. What are the obstacles or difficulties that you're likely to face over the next 12 months when it comes to achieving the vision that you outlined in the beginning of the program with that very first worksheet. And again, feel free to go ahead and post in some of these ideas to the Q&A if you wouldn't mind. Now, by the way, I realize we're getting close to the end of the hour here, and this webinar was intended to be a 90-minute program to begin with. I believe the webinar setup might have indicated that it was only an hour, which was a little bit of a technical error on our part. Those of you who can stay, you are welcome to join us. Those of you who do have to leave, I totally understand. But please keep in mind that you will be able to receive a copy of this recording. We will be forwarding this out to everybody within a couple of days. It will take a couple of days to get the video editing and post-production work done, but just take a minute and make sure you watch for an email to follow here in the not too distant future, so that we can go ahead and make sure you get the follow-through on the final 2 steps in this process. All right? Okay, so you've had a chance to think about what are the challenges or obstacles. Likely it is they're probably congregating around 1 of 3 areas. 1, how do I get more partners? 2, how do I overcome the differentiation curve? 3, how do I continue to build or accelerate that relationship to where it turns into the actual volume and transactional flow you mentioned? And then maybe 4th, where are the capacity challenges or issues? Well, that's where we start getting into the next phases. What is the next most important thing we have to fix, and what are the opportunities that we have to overcome it? Well, one of the key elements to this may be, and by the way, there's 1 of 3 primary areas where you find the solutions. Any business is going to grow, that's going to grow, will likely grow in 1 of 3 primary areas, and I call them the 3 C's of success. It's something that you may want to go ahead and jot down in your notes if you think about it. The 3 C's are lead creation, lead capture, and lead completion. Okay? Now, lead creation is marketing, generating a higher volume of leads per week, right? Lead conversion is what percentage of the potential opportunities decide to do their loan with me. Okay? Lead completion is really about capacity. So what you'll begin to find is 1 of those 3 critical focus areas is probably where you need to start first. I mean, if you're already doing 6, 7, 8 loans a month, more than likely, in all honesty, it's not 6, 7 loans a month consistently. It's 8 or 9 one month, 2 or 3 the next, 8 or 9, 2 or 3, 8 or 9, 2 or 3, and you're on this constant seesaw, peak and valley type situation. Well, part of the reason for that is because in a month where you've got a 8, 10, 15 loan pipeline, your focus has had to shift to completing those loans, processing work, chasing conditions, negotiating things with underwriting to try and make sure that file moves through on time, versus on the other side, which is the lead creation, the lead conversion, the lead capitalization, right? So often you may think you need more volume or more leads, but then when you really start to think about it, you may need more capacity, right? So you may have to look at your operational efficiencies and your systems and your staff before you really think about increasing your volume of activity on the marketing and business development side. Because what happens in the typical environment with most originators, and this is, by the way, this comes from tens of thousands of hours of coaching experience of working with some of the top originators in the country over the last decade that we've been doing full-time coaching as a team. And what we realized is that one of the biggest restrictions in growth may be your systems and your staff. But you always want to do systems before staff, before you can free up time. Because what happens is you spend all your time processing means you're not out in the field marketing or doing business development, which means your pipeline slows down and your lead flow dissipates. And when that happens, then you find yourself having to gear back up again the following month so that you can go out and produce more. Right. Some of the challenges that you guys have mentioned, like for example, biggest challenge, how do you overcome the competitors who promise what they know they cannot do? Right. Yes, unfortunately, there's still a lot of loan officers out there who do the no problem, no problem, no problem, oops, at the last minute type thing. And if you think about the timelines, especially with some of the recent changes with the till arresta integrated disclosure rules and the know before you owe and some of the additional timing implications that are coming or have already come as a result of that, one of the things is, why is it that we're under so much pressure to close these deals in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 30 days? And how do we change that dynamic, right? How do we get realtors to be less focused on cramming a square peg in a round hole as opposed to providing a customer experience? And what's more important to the consumer? Knowing the date it's going to close and being able to hit that date because they've built their life around it, as far as their move date, rental truck for the moving and furniture and all that other time they have to ask off work and all that other kind of stuff. We miss a Friday closing date and it gets pushed to Monday, there's a good probability that buying family might be homeless for the weekend. And they're paying an extra 3 days rental on the moving truck and hotel for 3 nights. That's an expensive thing. Wouldn't we be better off to set an expectation of 45 days that we know we can hit and be able to hit it consistently, as opposed to trying to cram a square peg in a round hole? And when you get the realtors to think about the dynamic of what happens to the family if we allow a transaction to proceed with false expectations, then where do we end up hurting more than we're helping? Part of that is about engaging partners and getting them thinking about what we can do as a team to create a better overall experience. And a lot of that has to do with volume. A big part of why agents are so much under pressure to close deals is because and it's not their fault, most of it is, again, goes back to that we don't know what we don't know. How could we? Right? We just get so focused in the day-to-day of life that often we find ourselves with those strategies or those challenges. Well, the solution to a slower pipeline is a bigger pipeline, right? Getting an agent to think about, well, I don't know, I could be completely crazy here, Mr. Realtor, but if we had a healthier pipeline, if our lead generation activity was more proactive and more consistent, and we had 1 or 2 new buyers every week coming online, how much would that reduce the stress, the pressure, the anxiety, and the fear of how many deals a month we're closing? I mean, is it possible? Is there any truth to the fact that maybe we could benefit from being a little more proactive in our marketing and lead generation activities, which would insulate us from some of the fear and anxiety of needing a deal to close so we can cover a house payment? Because by practical reality, guys, most agents started in the business watching what other agents did, because most of them started in the business, with the old-fashioned, here's a phone and a desk, good luck type of initiation, right? So they started looking around at what were the okay. So the quick question that popped in here, Kenny, I'll take care of you on that. Yes, definitely, I can email you the action guide. We've got your contact information. I'll make sure I get that over to you. Anyway, all right, guys. If we initiated an agent into thinking about, instead of being a lead receiver, being a lead generator, and getting them focused on how we can generate more volume, can we have a much more significant impact on their desperation? Because I think a lot of them have fallen into the hunter mentality. They go out, they hunt down a deal, they cut it, they skin it, they cook it, they clean it and eat it, and then they go out hunting for the next deal after the first deal's done, instead of managing a pipeline of leads and consistently adding to the top of that funnel. So if we can help them make that dynamic shift, then it's easier for us to get them to understand proactive business development instead of reactive lead receiving, and we can insulate and differentiate. And that's one way that we can be a key resource and partner in helping them improve their lead generation activities. We look at it from this perspective. Let's use fishing for an example, right? Okay, let's say I want to catch a fish because I'm hungry, right? Well, I can fish one of 2 ways. I don't know if any of you have ever been blue water fishing, but here's what it comes down to, right? I can troll around for a couple of hours. It can be a fun way to kill an afternoon, knock down a couple of brews with my buds, and maybe I hook a fish. Maybe I don't. Most likely I don't, in my experience. But even if I do hook a fish, there's a lot that can go wrong to keep the fish in the water instead of in my boat, so I can eat it, right? Well, if I'm looking to feed myself and my family consistently, is there a better, more reliable way? Well, what if I use a net, right? The probability of more fish over a shorter period of time is much greater in that environment. I'm pretty sure you'd agree. The reality is, what's the fishing part of lead generation for us and mortgage professionals and real estate professionals that we have the opportunity to partner with? But what if we take it to a completely different dynamic? What does that really look like, right? Well, what if we fish with a net like this, right? Then we're almost guaranteed to have plenty of fish. In fact, not even enough for our own family, but plenty to share with other families in our community. But can one person bring in a net that size? Obviously not, right? It takes a team of folks working together and it can be very dangerous, in fact. And if we're not working together, I mean, there's a reason there's a show on TV called Get the Deadliest Catch, right? It's not an easy sport in that experience, and everybody has to be working effectively as a team, knowing the game plan if they're going to be effective. So we need to engage with partners who become a resource and an asset, who we become an asset and a resource to, that we can work together as a team to improve each other's rate of success. So why do we want to think about partnerships, and what does a partnership really look like? Well, one of the best ways I've found to explain it over the years is to think about horses for a minute. Now, when I was a kid in high school, I mean, growing up as a kid, I was fascinated by the Budweiser Clydesdales. I grew up in central Missouri. Every Thanksgiving and Christmas parade, they would bring out the Clydesdales, so, you know, with the beer wagon and in the parade. And it was always really kind of a fun thing to watch. These are fascinating animals. If you've ever had the opportunity to get up close and personal to them, they are huge. I mean, they're like 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and they're just so massive and muscular. They're pretty amazing animals. Well, in high school, I had to do a research project, and I went out and started to look for. It was my physics class, so I found what was called the horsepower studies. It's like, great, I love these guys. So anyway, around the turn of the last century, there was a team of scientists that were trying to measure or come up with a unit of measure for a large amount of force, and the draft horse was the primary source of work at that time. So obviously that's where they started the horsepower studies. Now here was the problem, though. You know, you had two horses. The average horse could pull about 12,000 pounds. They were doing weight sled testing. Well, the problem they ran into is when they tried to scale the study up, they realized that they had a bit of a problem, because when they got two hitched together to the same load, the record is over 104,000 pounds of pull, or roughly 8 times the result of one horse pulling by himself. So if we think about what that looks like in the dynamic of the typical loan officer realtor partnership, what would that look like? Well, if we really are working together for the same goal in concert with unified strategy, 8 times the result would be roughly 120 leads a month. Now, some of you may be thinking I'm completely nuts at this point, and I get it, I understand, but hold that to the side for just a moment and ask yourself, if it was possible, what would it look like, and how could we create it? Let me give you a short example of one possibility. What this really comes down to is leverage. So if you think about the horsepower example, what makes that work? Why is it that those two horses could pull together? Now, most of this is way above my level of knowledge and experience, but the one thing I did figure out from that study is because there's a simple machine involved. It's called a lever, right? And not in the horsepower example. I mean, in the horsepower example, it works a little bit differently. It's a slightly different type of lever, but the basic, most simple form of a lever is a bar and a pivot point, right? Problem is, if I'm not using the tool properly, I'm not getting great results. I mean, 100 pounds of force over here gives me 100 pounds of lift over here. I might as well just go pick up the rock myself, right? But if I shift that position just a little bit, a couple of feet to one side, all of a sudden, 100 pounds of force gives me 1,000 pounds of lift on the other side. So what is the leverage that can create that 120 leads a month result if we are working in concert with our business partners? Well, a lot of it is joint effort. Secondly, it's leveraging strengths and assets, finding a need, and launching it on a fairly massive scale. For example, one of the things that I was very successful with in working with one of my own personal business development partners back in 2001 and 2 is I was working with a realtor by the name of Kay, and Kay was new to the area. She was an experienced realtor, but relatively new to the area. She transferred into my area as the spouse of a military gentleman. And starting her practice from scratch in our new community, one of the things that she began to realize is she was able to network with and make a couple of connections with a couple of other people similar to her position. One of the people she connected with was a lady who happened to be the wife of an officer who ran an insurance agency in the area. And she had acquired that insurance agency from the previous military spouse who had owned the office before her. And anyway, long story short, there was a customer base of about 2,500 customers in that insurance agency. Now, if you looked at an insurance agent as a potential business development partner, you may not think that's a great resource because often the borrower calls the insurance agent as the last thing they do before the closing, right? So not much referral opportunity there. What we didn't realize, though, is that when you start looking at that insurance agent's database, with 2,500 families that are already a paid subscriber and have a relationship with that agency, their percentage of ownership versus rental is likely very similar to that of the general market. So about 40% of those 2,500 families, which equated to about 1,000 families in that database, were non-homeowners. So between myself and Kay and the insurance agent, we started doing strategic home opportunity initiative style workshops for those insurance customers. We would invite them 50 to 100 at a time. We would bring them into the office in a spare education room that we had. We would turn it into kind of a fun social networking event where military families could get to know each other and network a little bit. We'd do a short, 90-minute educational program about some of the benefits of home ownership versus renter, and we would introduce them to a next step of how to get started with a home opportunity evaluation, which would lead to them moving down the path of getting pre-approved and out shopping for property. Over the course of a year, we were able to help, around 4 to 5 families a month when it scaled up. As Kay and I were working together with this insurance agent helping 4 to 5 families a month, it equated to about 60 additional transactions over the course of a year. Most likely it was probably well over that 120 leads a month by the time it filtered down. Because again, lead is only defined by, am I having a two-way conversation with this family, and are they in a position to benefit from doing something different with their housing situation? Now the net pull-through was probably another 30%, only about 30% of that. In other words, we're going to talk to 4 to find 1, right? And we knew that. We knew that as a numbers game going in. It was never our intention to do any better than that. But we also knew that if we cared enough to show people what we were passionate about and what we knew was an opportunity they were not aware of, and we cared enough to reach out to them proactively and engage them, then that's one of the ways that we become that real business development partner, that running buddy for that accountability partner. And if you think about it from this perspective, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to do the exact same thing that I was trying to do with borrowers, with business development partners like realtors, financial planners, insurance agents, CPAs, et cetera, et cetera. And when I've changed the dynamic from being a vendor, the guy who gets their deal done or not, to being a partner in helping them be more successful and more consistent at generating a higher volume of business in a much shorter period of time, then I have really become something much more valuable and much more long-lasting than the guy who's just promising transactional service. I mean, I'll often say, and if you've been on our webinar series before, as I'm noticing several of you on the list here have, is that you've often heard me say, I don't want to be the guy who just gets their deals done. I want to be the guy who helps them get substantially more business. Now, in doing that, I take on the role of coach. I mean, if you think about it, what do the top performers in the sports world have in common? For example, the Michael Jordans, the Wayne Gretzkys, the Tom Bradys of the world. What do they all have in common? Well, the reality is they all had somebody who cared as much about their own success, if not more so than they did. Someone who is there to be the support, the guidance, and the accountability partner that's going to make the change of helping them elevate the game to the next level. The person who's going to point out to them what they can't see for themselves that they're doing that isn't working as well as it could, or where there's opportunity and focus. So first of all, they become a trusted advisor, or you can become the trusted advisor, somebody who has credible knowledge, or at least time, energy, and effort that you're willing to invest in helping them find the answers to the questions of how do I generate 2, 3, 5 extra leads a week as an agent. You're someone who can help them see things they can't see for themselves because you have that outside perspective. You're not mired in the day-to-day minutia of what you do day in and day out and the habits that need to change for you to go from good performance to great performance. you can be there as a resource to bring them back online, because they'll get excited about ideas that you present to them, and then they'll get back to their office and they'll get distracted, and they'll get pulled into an emergency on a deal that's going sideways on them, and they'll get off track, and a week goes by and they haven't done anything. And you can reach back out and pick them up and dust them off and get them back on track again. You can be that external accountability resource to them that could really change the dynamic. It's kind of like becoming the running buddy to them, right? So what are the fundamentals of that? What does that really look like? Well, our coaching clients have introduced and have developed a system based on what we've learned through some of our research and development study. And part of that comes down to just being able to do 4 key things for them, right? In 1993, as part of an initial research and development work we did back in 2004, we ran across a study that was done in 1993 by Brigham Young University. And you guys can read the information on the slide, but basically what they came up with is if you do these 4 things, you have a 95% chance of follow-through. So the 4 things are: set a goal, a specific goal, create an action plan to complete that goal, put target deadlines on that goal for when you want to complete each of those milestones, and 4, share that plan with somebody you trust and respect and ask them to hold you accountable to that plan. If you do those 4 things, you have a 95% chance of following through and converting that idea into a specific action. So doing it for yourself, offering to do it for your business development partners, is a great way of engaging and connecting and deepening that level of commitment, loyalty, and volume. So when you get to the 4th step in the power growth process, now it's a drill down. Now it's taking the ideas of the concepts that I introduced you to a while back of the active opportunity mining and asking who-based, situationally aware questions about the life needs, the life changes, and doing so more consistently with our past clients when we reach out to them. Let me ask you something, Mr. Borer. As you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about home affordability being at an all-time high. Unfortunately, there's a lot of families out there that just have no clue how much buying power they have. So we'd really love to enlist your help in getting that message out to the community, and maybe even to some of the friends, family, and colleagues you care about who might be missing out on a huge opportunity. So let me ask you, 1, if I can enlist your help in this mission, and 2, to think about who do you know, for example, that has a stable job, works hard, pays their bills on time, but is renting the same place they've been in for a couple of years? Who do you know that's outgrown the home that they bought 2006 or 2007 and would really benefit from an upgrade because they're just busting at the seams in that little tiny starter home now that they've got 3 additional children, but yet they haven't upgraded, most likely because they're still thinking with what 2006 affordability looked like, not realizing it's 25 to 30% better now than it was then. So guys, as you're thinking about these drill down strategies, when you start thinking about how to use conversational strategies like the who questions in every borrower conversation you work with, or how to offer those home opportunity reviews to your past clients, or how to teach your agent business development partners how to use those home opportunity evaluation conversations with their past clients, you create a cycle of growth that can explode exponentially. The 1 who introduces you to 2, who introduces you to 4, who introduces you to 8, 16, 36, and explodes from there. Well, it comes down to a systematic process. But the next step is deciding what are the specific strategic solutions that you want to implement. What are the things that you want to accomplish over the next 12 months? What are the specific solutions to the obstacles you identified 6 months ago? Or, I'm sorry, not 6 months ago, 2 minutes ago. By the way, I apologize. MS is one of those things that if something comes out that just doesn't sound right, check me on it, because the reality is sometimes there's a short in the wiring in brain and voice. Well, that big challenge of differentiating ourselves when it comes to promoting to realtors, for example, and the competitors who promise the undeliverable, time frames, and overcoming that challenge. What is our strategy to overcome that? Well, one, we want to focus on not just being the guy who gets the deals done, but the guy who helps them get a lot more deals, which insulates some of the need to overpromise and underdeliver, which is what everybody else does. But then having a planned strategy for how to communicate our desire to underpromise and overdeliver. That doesn't mean setting the bar low so it's easy to step over. That means communicating real-world examples of worst-case scenarios that can likely play out. And, for example, taking a calendar and walking the agent through step by step the milestones that have to be reached, and sometimes why step 2 can't be done until step 1 is completed. And step 1 might be something like the appraisal. That if, like, for example, and you're in an environment where you have to have a full appraisal prior to submitting to underwriting, well, the realtor needs to know that and be aware of that you can't run simultaneous track in some organizations. You have to be able to complete the appraisal first before we can even get in line for underwriting. Now, likelihood that is an issue because we've got to gather documentation at the same time as well, but it's just part of the dynamic. And once we take the time to walk them through milestone by milestone, step by step through the calendar and talk about the days involved, I start a deal on the 28th, I, get application, full documentation from the borrower on the 5th of the following month, then, I get the appraisal back on the 7th, and now I'm ready to package and submit to underwriting, but underwriting is running 4 business days, so it's going to be the 15th or 16th before I get my initial conditional commitment back. Well, what does that look like? That's another teaching point or example. Where I'm really trying to go with this, guys, is use the worksheet to then help you identify what are the specific solutions to the challenges that you identified on the previous page. The next step then is to create a drill down. And this is exactly what it sounds like what I was introducing with that 4-step Brigham Young University process. This is where we're really engaging the plan. We're creating a progress, a focus, and a drill down. And that's where page 21 and 22 in the action guide comes in, which is a goal-specific drill down. Okay, this is a goal planning worksheet that is designed to pick the goal of, let's say the primary goal is establish 5 new business partners worth at least 1 good lead a week by the end of this year, 1 year from today. Okay, have 5 new business partnerships. That's the statement of the goal. Now, using that same power process at a tighter level of circle here, we want to identify, okay, what are the challenges or obstacles we're going to face? Excuse me for a moment. What are the challenges or obstacles we're going to face specifically in finding those? So challenges like creating a target list of prospects to go after, prospective partners to work with. Where do I find them? How do I engage them? How do I approach them? What are the strategies that I can use that are going to get the appointment, the highest likelihood? Those are the challenges you would write down on the left-hand side. Now, what we find is interesting is that often the challenge also has opportunity connected very closely to it. So if the challenge and difficulty is people who constantly overpromise and underdeliver, the solution is getting really good at articulating a worst-case scenario expectation and how we just don't want to be the guy who leaves a family stranded, homeless for 3 days because we promised something that wasn't really deliverable. Because, Mr. Realtor, if you're honest with yourself, isn't it a better solution for the family to expect 40 days and deliver on time with no stress than to try and cram it into 30 days, miss it by a day, and have everybody bent out of shape at us? I mean, I'd much rather get the 5 on the service rating from the guy who closed in 40 days happy than the 1 from the guy who was all stressed out and under pressure. I'm pretty sure you probably would as well, right? Because expectation is everything when it comes to customer service, right? It's did we deliver on promise? But that can be managed on the front end even better than it can be managed on the back end. Once it's locked in, once those expectations are solid, there's no going back. There's no change in it. We're the jerk who couldn't close on time at that point, right? Instead of the hero who brought it in early. That's just some of the dynamic we want to think about. So those are some of the specific solutions. The specific solution to that particular challenge would be practice the learn and utilize the under promise over deliver conversation, and get good at having that conversation with agents, explaining to them how it's generally in the consumer's best interest to have a target date we know we can hit, as opposed to one we hope for and miss, right? Then from there, you drill down to what are the step-by-step action plans to make sure you follow through on doing that. So one is identifying the materials that teach that strategy and communicate, and then we start to begin to execute and implement. And that's where that final step comes in, which is creating a repetitive cycle of ongoing repeat, refine, reinforce, repeat, refine, reinforce. If there's any one thing I can teach you that will leave you with the greatest probability of accelerating your growth dramatically, it's this one key concept. Every time you try a new strategy or idea, turn it into a learning opportunity. I don't care how bad it went. We can't change the past, even if it's the immediate 5-second ago past. All we can do is learn from it. So if we are taking and turning every experience, even the worst experiences, into valuable learning opportunities, then we will make a difference. And there's 3 key questions you want to ask. One is what went well, because you want to make sure you reinforce and celebrate the positive elements of that attempt. The second thing is, where can I improve? Again, we're putting a forward-leaning, solutions-oriented perspective to where there was room for improvement. And then 3, the answer will sound, question C or 3 in this system is going to sound very similar to the answer you gave for question B. The difference here is this is action-oriented. What will I do to make sure that I do improve the next attempt? Or if everything went great and it was perfect and I just want to make sure I use it again, then what's my next action? What else do I need to work on improving or refining? And that's kind of where this final worksheet in the action goals, and this is something our teams use, our coaching clients use periodically. In fact, we've even had teams who use this as a daily briefing. With their team, they use this worksheet as the first 10 minutes of the day. They get together as a team and they talk about what the most important goals are and what are the action steps that need to be done. And then at the end of the day, by the way, the first 2 steps are done in the morning. The last 2 steps are done at the end of the day. It's kind of a daily wrap-up, and it asks those same 3 questions. Well, where can I improve? What's our next step for tomorrow? That creates the action plan for tomorrow. So you set it up and you celebrate the successes. You're learning from the experiences and you're identifying next steps to continue to accelerate that cycle of growth. And that's where that refining execution, final 5th step in the process comes in. So with that being said, I'm going to transition out of kind of presentation mode, and I wanted to ask questions. I know I covered a lot of ground today. I know we talked about a lot of different things, but if you have any questions, if you'd like some additional information, or if you want to go ahead and we can go a little bit deeper on how we would refine or execute some of the strategies that I've introduced you to today, that's what this time is for at this point. So go ahead and pop into the Q&A. While you do that, by the way, one of the first questions that came in is what is maximum acceleration? What kind of programs do you offer? Well, let me cover that with you just briefly while you guys are thinking of other questions, and we'll come back to the Q&A in just a moment here. Well, maximum acceleration, we do things very differently than a lot of other coaching programs. We built our system to allow us to coach at an extremely tactical level. As a process of that, with the tens of thousands of hours, we've accumulated a massive library of training materials, content, and resources that are done under a very prescriptive model. We custom tailor everything we do to the specific needs of that organization, that individual, or that company. And as a result, we've developed basically 3 levels of service. We also, one of the things we have to do is we put our money where our mouth is. We don't believe in long-term contracts or commitments. It's a pay-as-you-go type program. So if you're interested in investing in any of our 3 programs, our home study course materials, our group coaching workshops, or our one-on-one personal coaching, those are available to you. Let me give you an example, though, of what we mean by that library of content. For example, I talked about the Power Partner Development System, the system that I originally started to develop or learn that helped me get to the point that I did in personal production. Now we've helped literally thousands of loan officers implement and execute a system designed to help you identify, capture, engage, and create high loyalty partnerships with business development partners like realtors, and how to take the dynamic of that relationship and convert it to something more than just that vendor only as good as your last deal, and to really truly develop a true power partnership, which again uses the acronym POWER, very similar to what I've introduced you to in today's program, as a turnkey system for creating rapid growth and expansion with your volume of business development partners. Now, that is a 6-hour web shop program taught through video instruction that give you access to resources, workshops, and practice exercises that we guide you through that are designed to allow you to be able to learn and execute the Power Partner Development System, which is designed to help you achieve that goal of 5 new partnerships in the next 12 months. Well, that program usually retails for $695. Is the normal retail value on that program. However, we're offering it to people who have watched this program and are participating in today's webinar for only $297, a little bit more than 50% discount. Now, how you get access to that is you can go to our website, mxlcoach.com. You go to the Shop tab, and in the top paragraph, there's a little click here button. That opens the shopping cart, which then allows you to go to and select under the DVD digital box sets the Double Your Income with Power Partners program. Within that Double Your Income with Power Partners program, once you add it to your shopping cart, you'll apply the discount code DBLMAX, and that will drop the price even an additional $50 to $247 for that one-time investment. I mean, if you think about the ROI on that, guys, I mean, you implement the strategies within that system. You get one agent who sends you 5 deals a year that are worth $1,000 a deal in commission to you. That's a $5,000 return on a $247 investment. I mean, that's like, what, a 2,500% ROI? I mean, that's a huge return, right? So can you afford not to is kind of what I guess you think about. One last thing I'll introduce you to, and then we'll get back into Q&A mode here. If you guys are interested in a little more detailed review of what we do, or if you want more information about our one-on-one or group coaching programs, it's a little bit of nuance because it's so custom tailored to each individual client because we put you through an extensive battery of assessments. We identify all the areas of opportunity for growth, and then we build a strategic growth plan for each individual client or each group that we're bringing online for our program. We want to do what we call a strategy session, which is a way of experiencing what coaching really feels like, so you can make a decision then whether it is to your benefit or not, if so, and how to proceed is kind of the topic of the conversation. It's just something we found to be the easiest, fastest way to help you truly understand the value of coaching is to actually experience it. So our strategy sessions are a no cost, no obligation, one-on-one coaching session with one of our coaches to determine what we can do to help support you and guide you through the next phase of your growth. If nothing else, you walk away from that session with a complete action plan to follow through on implementing, solutions to one of your biggest challenges that you're facing or experiencing, growth right then, and all for the investment of an hour of your time. I guarantee you it'll be well worth the time to invest. At least if nothing else, you walk away with a couple ideas that are going to help you grow your business. So if you'd like to take advantage of one of those strategy sessions, you're welcome to go ahead and just post so in the Q&A right now that you'd like to take advantage of one of those strategy sessions. Or for those of you watching this on recording, you're welcome to go ahead and go to the mxl.com/strategy website. You can sign in, give us the information that we need to be able to contact you to schedule one of those one-on-one appointments. Coincidentally, by the way, folks, there's only a handful of them available every week because they are a live session with a real coach who already has a fairly extensive roster of clients who are at limited capacity. Each of our coaches are down to only about 2 or 3 slots open currently at this time, so really, they're filled on a first-come, first-served basis. So please make sure you give us accurate phone number and email address so our scheduling department can go ahead and reach out to you and get a one-on-one appointment scheduled. Again, those of you listening live on the webinar, the fastest, easiest way so that you can get our attention and give us the information we need to schedule that appointment is to go ahead and post it in the Q&A right now. Give us that name, phone number, and email address so we can reach out to you and coordinate scheduling that one-on-one coaching session. Okay? All right. Guys, with that being said, I'm going to go back to the Q&A. Go ahead and post in the Q&A any questions you have about the content. I know we covered a ton of information in today's program. We're trying to condense what's normally a full-day workshop or a 3 to 4 month process with one-on-one clients down into a 90-minute program for you today. So some of it I had to go a little high level on. But I encourage you to take a little bit of time and invest in using these tools and resources to make sure that you're catching those key ideas and implementing those key ideas. So take a couple moments and go ahead and post any of those questions in the Q&A that you have, and I'll do my best to make sure I get them addressed here just before we wrap up. All right, one more question that just popped in. Where is the drill down on the income and volume goals exercise? That was on the download website. Let me pop this up for you guys so you can actually see it. When you actually go to the file folder that link was connected to, you'll be able to download the action guide dash allpurpose.pdf. Again, you want to go ahead and mouse over that action guide so you see the little arrow in the corner. When you click on that arrow, it gives you the option to download. And again, depending on what browser you're using, where your download goes, I've found to be somewhat of an interesting thing. A lot of times it'll automatically download it to kind of a dump folder, and you have to go back and find the resource that hid it somewhere down in the corner somewhere where you can actually find where it stuck the download. In this case, this is Internet Explorer, and it's directing me to what do I want to do with this thing. So I can do a file save as and put it where I want it, as opposed to it just dumping into a general download folder. I think Chrome is the one that typically puts it into a dump folder. That's where you could get those action guides. And the income and volume goals exercise that I showed you, the actual spreadsheet is here. Again, same process. Highlight the item, slide over to the right, click on the drop-down arrow, and that'll get you into it. Okay. By the way, guys, if there's anything else my team or I can do to help or support you in the growth of your business, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. That's our sole purpose in life, is getting you from where you are to where you want to be as fast as humanly possible. So to that end, no question is not worth asking, and there are no dumb questions. The last thing I want to share with you, I guess, guys, just before we have to jump off here, is you've invested 90 minutes of your time in watching this program. You'd be silly not to do something with the ideas that you've captured at this point. So don't let that time go to waste, because the reality is ideas without action are useless. They have no value unless you do something with them. So take these 4 actions, which are, by the way, pretty similar to what I've introduced you to already in today's program, because that was the topic of it. But right now, before the next phone call, before the next email, take 30 seconds to decide what you want to do, the next step. Okay? So what was the most valuable thing you heard in today's program? What action do you need to take to make it part of your daily business? By when are you going to have that action implemented? And who is going to be your accountability partner? You do those 4 things, you have a 85% chance or 95% chance of following through on implementing and making sure your ideas get put into action. With that being said, if there's anything else I can do, or the rest of the team here at Maximum Acceleration can do to help you in the growth of your business, please don't hesitate to ask, because that is our sole purpose, is getting you from where you are and where you want to be as fast as humanly possible. Thanks for joining us today, folks. Make it a great day.